Like there's a whole bunch of things of the kind of person you become as you go from that first $10,000 commitment to that million or $10 million or 100. Largest term sheet I ever had was $100 million. So I look back at that to the first 10. The basics are the same, but the person that I became 18 years later is a drastically different person.
You said it very well. That's $1 million tip right there. Because that's what the $1 million mindset is. People talk about $1 million mindset. That's not necessarily that you have to have millions of dollars to have that mindset. It's just like, you can start ground zero and you're cultivating all those habits or all those tips and tricks, bringing into your life. It's a lifestyle change. This is the Real Estate Vibe Show, and I'm your host, Vinki Loomba. And today we have a very special guest, Marcin Drozdz. I hope I said your name right. Welcome to the show, Marcin.
Yeah, you got it right. Thank you so much for having me.
So a little bit about Marcin. Marcin is a managing partner of M1 Real Capital, where he and his team focus on acquiring value-add multifamily properties throughout the Southeast. In the last 16 years, he played a key role in securing over 9 figures in capital or private capital, enabling the acquisition of 1,500 units across the US. This has positioned him as a trusted authority in the realms of capital raising and real estate acquisitions. And that's what our today's topic is as well. So our today's topic is $1 million mindset, because Marcin is all about mindset and capital raising. So we're going to be learning from him about the $1 million mindset and attract millions for your next project. So Marcin, to get started with, what do you think? How crucial is in mindset in the process of capital raising?
Well, garbage in, garbage out. And if you're thinking, if you've got stinking thinking, then it's not going to work. Nothing is going to work. I mean, you look at an athlete that gets on the field, and you can see they have fear in their eyes. You can tell that they're going to lose the game. Like you can, or you compare that to somebody who is sitting down to a negotiation. The person that has that feeling of inferiority or imposter syndrome or whatever limiting belief that they're going through, if that is your state, that is your mental state, then you've already predetermined the outcome for yourself. And those 6 inches between your ears, I mean, it's either an asset or a liability. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they go through every day and, maybe there's a calmness outside, but there's a war in here. Mm-hmm. And really getting your mindset cleared up is what's going to allow you to attract capital opportunities, business partners. People want certainty in their lives. And if you're standing there looking like your whole world's going to melt down, then you're not reflecting the outcome that you're looking for, right?
That's so true. And you said it very well, because your inside reflects your outside, because you're projecting whatever is inside. So if you have fear inside, that's what you're projecting, and that's how people are going to perceive you. But how did you get here? Let me ask you that, because it's quite a journey, because it does not happen automatically. It takes time and a lot of personal development path that you have to follow to get here wherever you are today. So tell us about your story, who you are, how did you get here?
Sure. Yeah. And again, thank you for the opportunity to join you with your listeners here. My story started out pretty much like everybody else's that eventually looked at becoming a real estate investor. I read a few books. Rich Dad Poor Dad was one of them. And you read the book and you're like, this is easy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you learn very quickly that it's a book, and then real life is not like a book. That's so true. You have some challenges. The thing that I think encompasses my mindset most is I've always forced myself to do the hard things. And anytime I've ever avoided the hard things, that's typically when I got the lesson. So you're going to learn the lesson one way or another in life. You're going to learn it by avoiding the thing you need to do, or you're going to learn it by going head on into the things that you need to do. And the best analogy I can give you for that, kind of preempt the whole conversation. When you have on a storm, when there's a massive storm outside, and you compare the actions of a cow and a bison. I think that's probably the easiest way to look at it. A cow, when they hear a storm, they run from the storm. And that's synonymous to running from your problems. And of course, what ends up happening is the storm follows the cows as it's moving, and the cows get wet longer, and they live in fear longer because they keep running from the thing. Whereas a bison, and you can Google this, the big buffaloes, they
Mhm,
actually run into a storm. And
mhm,
the reason why they run into the storm is because somewhere ingrained in them, they know that the shortest amount of pain they're going to endure is by running right at their challenge, right into the storm, so to speak. So they get wet less, they're in the storm less, and they run through it, they're gone. The pain is gone. So, in my life, that's what I did. I always put myself into environments where I would experience pain that I induced. So I was an incredibly shy, timid. I stuttered a lot when I was a teenager. The idea of approaching a girl to talk to a girl about a date, I mean, I would have rather have done just about anything else. What I did to deal with my shyness is I went to Toastmasters. And Toastmasters, for those of you who don't know, it's a program. You pay a couple $100s a year, and you practice speaking in front of other people. You go once a week. I was literally the youngest person there, no facial hair, nothing. I think I was 18 years old, 19 years old. And I was in there with people in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and we all had the same challenge of fear of public speaking. So that was my biggest fear. As I understand it, it's everyone's biggest fear, or lots of people's biggest fear. So rather than hiding from it, I went right into the storm, and I dealt with that. And going through that taught me how to take my time, how to articulate my ideas, how to be aware of the conversations that I'm having, not always having to think about what I'm going to say next, but being comfortable with the silences and the pauses, and learning all that. And one thing led to another, and I managed to talk my way into working at a private equity firm when I was 21 or 22 years old, literally fresh out of school. I had no business being there, but I talked my way into it. And through that, I went from buying the single family homes that I
mhm.
initially did on my own, and all of a sudden they threw a stack of papers at me and said, "Hey kid, we're buying this 250 unit, garden style or 55 plus community in Arizona at the time, and here's the paperwork. Get on the phone, call the investors." I'm like, okay. And
Mhm.
I was uncomfortable then. I was uncomfortable at Toastmasters. I was uncomfortable when I left the firm and started my own first fund. And I've consciously gone after the pain to make sure that I don't feel it anymore. And that's probably been the biggest thing, is that I've just gone after the thing that I'm afraid of. And there have been times in my life where I've avoided it, like so many of us do. But the problem is you're going to keep getting the same lesson until you learn it, right?
Yeah, you said it very well because life does not happen to you, it happens for you. So as
100%.
long as you understand that concept and pain, I mean, success is like the on the other side of challenge, or the pain you call it. Pain is just like a challenge. It's basically these challenges come in our life to teach us something. So if you go in head on, like you were giving us the analogy, because you're going to go through that very quickly and you're going to figure out your path. But amazing story. I really love it. I'm going to ask you one question here, but having that mindset that I'm going to face this, I'm going to face this challenge, that's sometimes very hard, because when the challenges hit you, a lot of time, people go into their shell. They're like, oh my God, I wanted to protect myself. Right? It's not like that they wanted to do it because that's the mindset they grew up with. This is a human nature because of our physical body. This is a mechanism in our physical body that we are, I would say, built this way or tuned this way, that whenever there is some challenge or some fear, we just wanted to protect ourselves. That's at the physical level, not at the mental level, right?
Yeah.
But there's a shift. So I wanted to ask you, how important that shift is, or how can somebody get to that level, or some principles or some lessons that you have learned along the way.
Well, it's a daily activity, and being daily conscious daily about your choices that you make. I mean, you've probably heard this before, the hard road becomes easy, the easy road becomes hard, right? And I think so many people choose the easy initial
Mhm.
decision as
Mhm.
opposed to the hard one. And again, manifesting that into your reality is a function of consciously knowing what that hard decision is. One of my hardest decisions I had to make early on is getting up early, because I love to sleep in till 8, 9 o'clock. Well, you can't sleep in till 8 or 9 if you want to perform at a level that is well extraordinary. You can't. So at 21 years old, 22 years old, I made it a habit of getting up at 5 in the morning. I didn't do it right away, but I slowly, first it was 7:30, then it was 7:15, then it was 7. And then eventually it was a game. Like, how early could I get up and still function the next day?
Mhm.
So I went to the extreme. I ended up going to like 3:30 in the morning just because it was nuts. And I was proud of that. That wasn't sustainable for me long term. But eventually, as I regressed back to my new average was 5 a.m. And I'm 38, 39 soon to be, and I've kept that since. And I love getting up at 5 in the morning. It almost doesn't matter when I go to bed. It's not like you one day decide to become this drastically different person, because that's not sustainable. But slowly working towards that, with that analogy, that's what's worked for me. And eventually that ends up manifesting in your day to day, where you can get on the phone with an investor that's going to invest potentially $1 million, and you're comfortable in that state because
Mhm.
you started with that $10,000 investor, then the 50, then the 100, then the 250. And as you go through the different check sizes in the context of capital raising, you become a different person, because you have to learn a different vocabulary. You have to be comfortable with a different due diligence process. You have to understand things in a very specific way. You have to have the corporate structure, the governance, the accounting, the knowing the difference between audited financials and internal. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things of the kind of person you become as you go from that first $10,000 commitment to that million or $10 million or 100. Largest term sheet I ever had was $100 million. So I look back at that to the first 10. The basics are the same, but the person that I became 18 years later is a drastically different person.
You said it very well. That's $1 million tip right there, because that's what the $1 million mindset is. People talk about $1 million mindset. That's not necessarily that you have to have millions of dollars to have that mindset. It's just like, you can start ground zero, and you're cultivating all those habits or all those tips and tricks, bringing into your life. It's a lifestyle change, basically. So you're living in abundance all the time and attracting what you are, because you attract what you are, not necessarily what you desire or what you aim for. So let's move on to your first. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just gonna say, is making it real, talking it into existence is a big part of it, but then taking action on that in a small step is the most important piece. And that's where so many of these, self-help, rah programs go off the rails, because they make you feel really good. But then it's like, okay, what is the action to substantiate the thought process? You need to have that action to correspond the thing. Otherwise, you just go off in la la land in your head. Like, when people say, well, I can't find any deals, I say, okay, how many offers did you write this week? Well, you don't understand, blah, blah. I go, okay, so you wrote 0 offers. So you're upset that you found no deals, writing 0 offers. And then people are like, well, I guess I should write some offers. I go, yeah, no kidding. Like it's just, or I didn't find any investors this month. Okay, how many meetings did you have? How many presentations did you give? Like the actions have to be consistent with the goals. Otherwise, it's the worst kind. You have to take, and the answer is, well, Marcin, I don't know what to say. I don't have a deal yet. All these limiting beliefs. Okay, cool. So that means you can't talk to somebody? Of course it means. You could still sell them on the concept. You could still see what they're doing, where they're investing, why, what, take that action. Like things will, let me ask you this, Vinki. When you drive somewhere, do you check the news to see if all the lights are green before you leave the house?
No.
Of course not. Why would you? Because you'd never leave the house. So why do people in the investment world think, well, until everything is perfect, I'm not going to start talking to people? It's like sitting at home in your car waiting for all the lights to be green before you can drive to the grocery store. It doesn't make sense.
That's true. I think that's what we were talking about earlier too, how people are fearful, or they just wanted to stay in their comfort zone. So it's just like challenging your status quo. Whenever you wanted to do something, it's like you were talking earlier, jumping from your current status to the next level. It's like playing the video games. That's what I tell all the time, because people live only in the 80% all their life. So in order to get to the top 20%, you have to jump. And when you get to the 20%, then the next level comes up, like in the video game, then you go to the next level. And again, you're in the 80%. So 80-20 rule is so applicable in your life everywhere. So I'm going to come back to your first raise that you're talking about in Phoenix. You were so young, early 20s, and you got this opportunity, which is amazing. And opportunities come to you when you're action oriented. I have seen that in my life. Because when you're taking actions, you'll see so many opportunities all around you all the time. And if you're sitting on the sidelines just waiting and thinking, oh my God, that person got that person got that, I didn't get it, it's your fault, not their fault. Then you're not getting something, right? So going back to your first opportunity, tell us about that. You are in Canada. Please remind us and my viewers, you are not in US. And the first opportunity that's in Phoenix in US across countries.
Yeah.
How was that like, or what were you feeling at that time? Any hesitations, or what was going in your mind? And you took that big opportunity.
So we were back I got into the business 07, 08 when the world crashed, right? So I started at the firm in May, just before, excuse me, just to that fall, Lehman Brothers. So I'm in the office. It was May 2008 or 7, I forget the year, but I'm in the office at the firm, and we just got the mandate. We were partnering with a sponsor in Arizona on acquiring a 55 plus community in Sun City, Arizona. That's where it was. 220 something units, I think. Anyway, the point was our firm was a capital firm, and we partnered with sponsors. So that was a great opportunity for us. The US market was in a really, really tough spot, as you probably remember. And raising in that environment was incredibly challenging because the stock market had dumped 40, 50%. Mutual funds, REITs, I mean, everything was down 50, 60. It was a bloodbath for a lot of people. So that was the first raise that I did into that type of an economy, which was just, so when I looked at the last couple of years, people are like, it's hard to raise the money. I'm like, you have no idea what hard looks like, because I started during the storm, literally. And that deal, I mean, the reason I ended up raising, I think we needed 8 or 10 million. It's just so long ago. I think we needed 8 or 10 million in equity for it at the time. I think I did about 3 or 4 of that firm. And how did I get it done? Well, I had to become somebody that could understand the documents, first of all, because this wasn't a joint venture agreement. You had a full form securities documents, registered funds, you have all the different audited, you had so many different things. So I had to learn all those things. And when you're at the firm, they're not going to sit there for 20 hours with their lawyers and teach you everything. They're going to answer the questions that you bring. So I learned as much of the things as I could, and then came and asked really good questions about the remaining 10 or 20%, so that I demonstrated that I'd done the work, which is why they liked me, because I took initiative and I did the mental work first to then come and ask intelligent questions on the remainder of it. So compared to my peers, it uniquely equipped me to be able to raise money, because I understood more things than the other sales guys, so to speak. And when people started asking intelligent questions, I wouldn't have to say, well, let me check. And because people lose their confidence when you don't know the basics of an offer. But how was it? I mean, I shook like a leaf, right? I remember the first person that said they're in. I was almost on the phone, like, really? Okay. And they were going to do $10,000. I said, great, I'll come pick up the check. They're like, well, I live, up here. And that was 2 hours from where our office was. I'm like, oh, don't worry, I'll be right over. I literally got off the phone, hopped in my car, and drove 2 hours to help them with the paperwork and get the check, because I was worried that they were going to change their mind.
Nice. So you were walking the walk and talking the talk. I think that was
100%. I was terrified. I was just, I forget, woman's name was Wendy. I forget her last name, but I'm like, okay, Wendy, I'll be right there. I literally drove up 2 hours just to go pick up the check, because to me it was, I was so blown away. So fear that people have is, we're not programmed to ask people for money, and that's why it's such a hard thing for people to do. But then when you start creating a system and a follow-up process and a very professional way to lay out a conversation, which I eventually ended up developing for myself, I ended up creating a process for it, which I've since called the easy system, which we can talk about later. But ultimately, I ended up creating a format for myself so that I had a way to gauge how I did in every meeting, and what the issues were, what the obstacles were, and how I could look at it sort of on a first principles basis. And with me, was it the product? Was it how I described certain things? Was it certain questions that I didn't have answers to? Like, I methodically looked through it, and I ended up developing a process for it, because I mean, you need a process. When you buy a building, you have a checklist. When you asset manage, you have a checklist. So to me, it was just obvious. You need to have a checklist. You need to have a system when you're raising money.
That's true. I have that listed in one of my questions. I'm going to ask you about your easy system. But before going there, I'm going to ask you, you mentioned that you went through all the docs, you understood completely, and then you were at a position where you were able to answer any and all questions that any of the investors have, and you were talking, because you put yourself at a very comfortable position. So here comes to my mind is, what are some of the essential factors, individually as well as at the project level that makes you stand out? What do you say or how you say it so you connect with the people at their level? Because sometimes people
Yeah.
are talking, my project, I'm offering this, I'm doing this, without thinking what the other person's thinking or what's going on in their mind.
Yeah. So I will share one thing, Vicky. I don't think I've ever known everything about every document because there's a lot there. Like
That's true.
all you can really do is focus on the main material matters that are relevant. And if they ask you very minute, nuanced questions, you can always just write that down and say, hey, I'll get back to you on that. That's a really good question. Because sometimes, you're talking about 200-300 pages of documents sometimes. So I don't think it's possible to know everything, but you need to know the core of the offer. But to answer your question more directly, I actually spend a lot more time with people talking about their goals and their priorities as opposed to the offer that we had. So I was genuinely trying to figure out if what their goals were even remotely lined up with what we were doing as a business. Because if somebody is hell bent on having liquidity every 6 months because of XYZ, or they need certain things because they have their own biases, then I wasn't going to be the guy that was going to try to convince them to see the world the way I saw the world.
Mhm.
So when I met with new investors, a good portion of that meeting would be spent on their goals, their priorities, things that were important to them, their experience with real estate, how it worked for them before, how they identified risk. I just wanted to better understand how they saw the world. And if they saw the world in a way that was conducive to how we operated as a company, then I would then transition the conversation to the deal because it was a fit. And here's why, based on the things they told me. If they were looking for things that were way out there, or they were trying to potentially commoditize me and say, well, this guy's brochure says 17%, how come yours is a targeted at this? Or what if they were trying to pick apart the marketing materials or whatever it was, I would typically back away from the conversation and say, look, if you're going to make a decision on what a brochure says, then it's probably not going to be a good idea for us to
Right.
work together.
Mhm.
And they would, that those types of comments would be very interruptive for people because they'd say, well, what do you mean? I'd
Mhm.
say, well, you're not shopping for a mortgage here. You're shopping, hopefully, for a relationship. I'm looking for investors that want to build a relationship, not just on this deal, but for the next 5 or 10 years. So if you're just sitting there and telling me that this brochure says this and ours says this, and that's the basis of your comparison, then I don't think we're going to be a fit. And a lot of people would say, well, no, I want to build it because they were taught by previous people they met with that it was like a commodity, like you're selling a cell phone or something or a car.
Exactly. Mhm.
And I never took that approach with people, never. And, or people would ask me, well, what do you think about so and so's deal? I'd say, look, I don't know much about their deal. We're in a good market. I'm not sure if it's a good price or not. However, here's how we look at things. And I would always reframe things in the context of what we do. So, never badmouth anybody. I would always focus on the relationship, focus on our goals, our priorities. And because I took the time to get to know them personally in terms of what they wanted in their life, then and sometimes this would happen where somebody would tell me whatever it is that their life circumstances are, and I'd say, look, I appreciate that we took this meeting. And they're like, so what about the deal? I would look, I appreciate we took the meeting. I'm just not sure we're gonna be able to work together. Well, why not? I'm interested. I go, I know, I appreciate that, but you said you needed X. This is actually Y. So I just don't think we're gonna line up. And two things would happen. One, they'd say, hey, I really appreciate you saying that. And ironically, then they would super trust you and
That's
bring you
true.
referrals
Mhm.
because you're not trying to just shove something down their throat. Or two, they'd say, well, no, actually, I don't need it to be like this. That's what I'm used to. And so they would have to put their cards on the table. And I'd say, okay, so you're open to a longer timeline, or you're open to a different state, or you're open to whatever the thing. Yeah, I'm open to it. Okay, great. Then we can have a good conversation about the deal now in the context of your goals, as opposed to how do most people set up meetings? They show up, they pull out their deal and they pitch the deal. And then the person at the end of 30 minutes, what they just sit there and then you learn nothing about them. So
It's super hard.
the only thing you could say to them at the end of the call is, so do you want to invest? And they're like, well, I want to think about it. And then you're like, well, what do you want to think about? This is a don't
Mhm.
read. And then you start selling, and then the pressure just goes, and
Mhm.
then you start asking them questions. Those questions now are inauthentic because from the investor standpoint, it's like, oh, well, I said no, and now you want to know about me and my life. So now you
Exactly.
could manipulate me into the deal. Like you either care about people or you don't. And I for me, it was always more powerful to take the time to establish that relationship because whether we could work together or not was inconsequential to me because I'm here for like I'm doing this for well, I've been at this 18 years. I'm going to do this hopefully for another 50, 60 years. Like I'm this is my world. So,
Exactly. Mhm.
I'm trying to collect the right humans for my world, if that makes sense.
That's true. It's always about the relationship more than the transactional relations, because people
Yeah.
forget that we are here in this life. I would say, I mean, looking at the bigger schema, I'm going to talk about. We are here in this life to connect with each other and help each other grow. So
Yeah.
once you understand that concept, everything is super easy. And now we're going to talk about your easy system because I know you have discovered this easy system of capital raising. So if you can share that with us, we'll love that.
I can. I'll just mention one more thing on the relationship
Mhm.
building thing. There is the law of diminishing returns as well.
Yeah.
So what that means is you don't need to spend 3 hours with somebody to build a relationship. I would rather spend 3 hours with you over the course of 6 months,
Months.
30 minutes at a time or 20 minutes at a time, rather than having this big 2, 3 hour meeting with somebody. So that's also the law of diminishing returns. I see some of the people that God bless their soul, they spend all this time with people and then they run out of time and they never hit their goals. Well, you spending 2 hours with somebody is not going to make them warm up to you faster. So, being respectful of your time as well is also
Very
important. So build the
important.
relationship. But again, you're much better served spending 20, 30 minutes at a time with somebody over 6 months as opposed to just 3 hours all at once and then forgetting about them and then spending 3 hours with someone else because you're not building that momentum as much. But yeah,
So and
so
plus you're more productive that way too. When you're
oh
spending
yeah,
time and you're gonna come back next time, you'll have something even better, something to share with them. And maybe
yeah,
you'll discover something new, something better to
yeah,
talk about.
yeah.
So I
Uh,
like
and
that. That's very good to
and,
bring.
and that's a good sort of frame for the easy system. So easy stands for exclusive, abundant, scarce, and your allocation. So let's say I met with you 6 months ago and you liked what I was doing. You just weren't liquid at that moment. You had a business you had to invest in. You had a kids college fund. You had to whatever it was. The point is you like me, you like what I'm doing. You just don't have any money right now, or something along those lines.
Mhm.
It's like you're interested. Okay, so how do we stay in touch in a way where it is beneficial to both of us, and how do we get back in touch? And I created the easy system to make that simpler. And E for exclusivity is quite honestly the most important part of that is right, exclusivity is so what when you're working on a deal or a fund or whatever structure you have, what makes that thing yours? And what I mean by that is, well, case in point, the last building I bought, I paid 77,000 a door in a
Mhm.
market where it's easily 100,000 a door.
Mhm.
That shows value. Two, exclusive. I paid half of the replacement cost for that building. Well, that's fantastic. That's another thing. Three, it's on a major road with buses and all kinds of jobs and employment. So exclusivity talks about 3 or 4 points, maybe 5 points that make that deal, whether you're doing a syndication or a fund or whatever it is, it's what is that thing that a lay person can understand. So whether I'm an accountant, a plumber, an attorney, whatever I do for a living, if you talk to me in the context of, hey, the rents were 700, we're going to be able to do 1100, or hey, we paid 77,000 a door, the nearest comp was 92. or it's on the corner of X and Y, and because of that, there's 50,000 cars a day. Like, give me 3 or 4 things that immediately show me that there's some value there. So E for exclusivity is number one. A for abundance. If you've ever had a phone call from somebody where it's like they pitch you a deal and it's almost like they're putting the onus on you to invest because they need your money, don't do that. Don't create an environment where you're making it clear to the investor that you need their money to do this deal. So you need to create an abundance of people to talk to. And you can do this in multiple ways. You can do it through a newsletter, you can do it through a podcast, you can do it through speaking at events. The point is, you have to be able to say something along the lines of, hey, Vinki, I know we didn't get a chance to work on the last deal. I came across this. Here's why I like it. Boom, boom, boom. I wanted to get on the phone with you because I'm actually about to send out my newsletter next week, next month, whatever it is. And it's going out to X amount of people. And I know you wanted to talk to me about this. So you're demonstrating that you have options. And again, it's not slick sales. It's not meant to be anything other than the fact is that you're politely letting them know that you're letting them know before you go out to your bigger network so that they're part of that inner group or inner circle, so to speak. So that you've created the right environment for them where they get a sneak peek. Real estate agents do this on new condo sales all the time, right? Before the condo gets unraveled, before they open up the sales center, they pre-sell 20 to 50% of the building, just so that when they open it up, they can already say 50% sold. How do they do that? They have an abundance of people that say they're interested in the next deal. So creating that abundance, you have to add value, which is another conversation. And I'm sure your podcast is focused a lot on that, but so that's the abundance piece. You have to demonstrate that you have other options and do it in a way where you're of service to them and you're showing them that you value them ahead of going out to everybody else. So therefore, here's a chance. This is for scarcity. So scarcity is, there's 2 ways to create it. One is time. And well, if you're buying an apartment building, you're closing on a certain day.
All right.
So I don't recommend you use that day. I recommend you have what's called a financial closing day. So hopefully you're at least 15 to 30 days before the closing, because God knows what could happen with the lender's requirements and anything else, and who knows what else. So all of us have been surprised by lenders. Typically, they give you less money than more. So it's always good that you have enough time between when the investors need to be in and when you actually close. So that's one way of creating scarcity. And you could just as easily say, well, when do you need to know by? You could say, well, we're actually closing the financial closing is on June 15th. Today's May, fill in the date, and then you can create some scarcity there. The other form of scarcity is capital. So you only need another $500,000. You only need $2.5 million. You need what you need. And then what you do is you break that down one step further so it's real to them. So for example, if you needed $2 million and your average investor was 100 or 150,000, you can say, so Vinki, we've got about $2 million left. Our average investor has been between 100 and 150,000. So we're really looking for another 15 investors or so. So there's your scarcity. So either time and or the amount of investors or money. Now, if you have a partner and you guys are allocating capital, so for example, if you're part of a larger raise and you're raising 5 million and your partner's doing 2 and you're doing 2, you can say the raise is, 4 million. If the raise is 4 million, you could say, well, the total raise is 4 million. I'm responsible for 2. My partner's handling the other 2 with his network. And then you can break it down to a digestible chunks so that it becomes clear to everybody that you're going to close.
Exactly.
That's really important. And then the conversation, they'll probably ask you some questions about the market or the deal or how this compares to something else. And it's a little bit of a dance. And you might be 10, 15 minutes into the call. And at some point, it's abundantly clear that they're interested. So you would move on to why, which is your allocation. So you'd say, look, Vinki, obviously you're going to need more information on this. And I'll send you the full package. The full data room, it has X, Y, Z, it has all these things in it. You can review it, look at it till your heart's content. That said, if the deal looked the way you thought it looked, is there an amount that you'd consider allocating for this? And if they're not interested, they'll tell you, nah, I'm not interested. I don't have the money, blah, blah, blah. But if they're genuinely interested, because they've taken the time to talk to you, they'll always preface it with, I have to look at the documents, or I have to do this, or I have to fill in the blank. They're always going to give you a statement, but they'll probably say, yeah, I'd probably do 50,000, 200,000. I'd probably look at X dollars. And obviously make sure you're complying with your laws, 506B, 506C, accredited, whatever kind of money you make sure you're obviously qualifying them. But aside from that, you'd say, okay, so why don't we do this? Like I mentioned to you, I've got a few other phone calls I have to make. I still have a few other people I need to talk to. I only need $500,000. This 200,000 would take a fair bit of that. So why don't I set that $200,000 aside for you? Today's Thursday. I'll send you the full package. Why don't we get on a call on Monday and see if you have any remaining questions, and then we can convert that 200,000 and make sure it's still there for you. Should you want to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Now, if they're super interested, they'll say, sure, no problem, set it aside for me. If they're not, if they're kicking tires, they'll be like, nah, it's okay. I probably won't do this. But it's a very professional, clear, and concise way. And then guess what? You now have a soft commit. So you get on the next call, and now you're not looking for 500,000. You've got another soft commitment. Now maybe you're looking for 300,000. So you work your way through the list, right? Obviously, make sure you have the right paperwork, your lawyers, everything has to be legal, and make sure you're qualifying people the way you're supposed to for your state or your province or wherever you're investing money from. But that's a way for you to work your way through things and not spend hours in what I call leisure conversations with people. I mean, you have a timeline, you have a deadline, you got to get to work.
That's true. I think that's a really good system. I love your easy system. And we are way over time. I can keep on talking to you. This is such a great conversation, but this brings us to our rapid fire round. But before going to my rapid fire round, I would like to ask you one more golden nugget, and short one, if you can share with our audience.
Okay. When things are going well, you're never as smart as you think. And when things are going to heck, you're never as dumb as you feel.
That's a good one.
That's probably my favorite.
And I like that. It's a really good one. So this brings us to our rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You're going to answer in 1 word or 1 sentence only. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Number 1 is, what is one of the most important thing that you have learned in your life, and how did your life change after learning it?
Consistency, being consistent with myself. So, I mean, that whether it's my health, my wealth, my happiness, my relationship with my wife, consistency. Anytime I'm off my consistency, that's when I start to feel pain, and not the good pain. That's when the world is reminding me
to get back on track.
To get back on track. Yeah.
That's a good one. So share one good book with my audience that you like, besides Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh man, I'll try to give you one that I haven't talked about recently. You know what was really good actually for a mindset? I read it recently. It was Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, the story, the founding of Nike. It's not really a popular book, but it's starting to become more popular. It's a fantastic book on mindset, because that guy, the amount of stuff he went through to build Nike to where it was, whether you agree with where it is today or not, just the psychology of his mindset, his state to build Nike, tremendous read.
Thanks. In 1 word, what does life mean to you?
Giving. The more I can give, the happier I am. But my daughter, hopefully future kids, the more I could be giving to the people around me, the more fulfilled I feel.
I like that. And that's so true. The more you give out, the more you get back. And I think that's the biggest happiness in this world, when you are making a difference or just giving more out. And that makes me really happy too, more than earning for myself. What is your biggest passion?
Oh, my wife would say talking. I would phrase it as teaching. I love to teach. I love it when that's why we started the community a few years ago. For me, when someone clicks, like when they get it and they action it, honestly, like we've done, like, yes, we can do things ourselves, and we do it all the time, but nothing's more rewarding than seeing somebody come and then they make that $100 or $1 million, $100 grand or $1 million, that to them is that a first. That to me is, I love that.
That's truly rewarding. If you could turn back in time and talk to your younger self, I'm not sure if it'll change anything, but still I'm going to ask you, if you talk to your younger self, what would you tell yourself and why? Because you started very young, and obviously you did multiple things right, but there might be something that you wanted to change.
Look, I've done things right. I've done things wrong. You're not going to meet somebody who's a millionaire or a billionaire that hasn't done things where you're just like, So for me, I would have told myself to slow down and kind of appreciate the journey a little bit more, because I'm in my late 30s. I'll be 40 here soon. And I quite honestly don't remember my 20s. And I don't mean that I was drinking or doing drugs or any of that stuff. I just mean I was always go, go, go. So I never really stopped to appreciate the journey that I was on. I was always chasing the next thing. And my 20s, because of that, were a blur. It wasn't until my early mid 30s where I really started to appreciate the journey I was on, and not always tying my happiness or perceived happiness to that next thing.
That's what I always say. I love that, in the chaos of life, don't forget to live.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no destination. It's all the journey that you can enjoy. So how can people reach out to you, Marcin?
Well, the best way is my website, marcindrozdz.com. Hopefully you can put that in your show notes, because it's a little bit of a mouthful. Marcindrozdz.com is the best way. We've got a bunch of resources there. We also have an ebook that we can link through you, Vinki, as well. It's called Unlimited Investor Leads. I actually just put it out here recently. And it talks about whether it's your first 10 grand or you're trying to get a 10 million or $100 million term sheet. It kind of walks you through the flow. The easy system's in here as well. It's a free download, so we can link that through to you, and we can make it free through your network as well.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming to my show, Marcin. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.